US President Joe Biden has pitched his proposals for what he calls a once-in-a-generation investment in America. In his first speech to Congress as the US President, he outlined sweeping plans to increase wages and invest in infrastructure to create more jobs. He also stressed the need for the US to reassert its place in the world, saying it must show its adversaries that democracy still works.
Joe Biden spent decades in the US Congress as a senator. Now, he was back with an ambitious program that could see him becoming a transformational US president.
Good to be back.
He began by drawing attention to the historic fact that for the first time ever, the two people behind him were women.
Madam Speaker, Madam Vice President, no president has ever said those words from this podium. No president has ever said those words.
Then, a grim summary of his first 100 days, combined with a note of optimism.
100 days since I took the oath of office and lifted my hand off our family Bible and inherited a nation, we all did, that was in crisis. The worst pandemic in a century. The worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. The worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. Now, after just 100 days, I can report to the nation, America is on the move again.
Offering a wide-ranging vision of jobs, prosperity, and a new era of big government with big spending plans, Biden said he would pay for it all with higher taxes on corporations and the super rich.
Continuing a cycle of growth, things worse. 20 million Americans lost their job in the pandemic, working and middle-class Americans. At the same time, roughly 650 billionaires in America saw their net worth increase by more than $1 trillion in the same exact period. My fellow Americans, trickle down. Trickle-down economics has never worked, and it's time to grow the economy from the bottom and the middle out.
On international policy, Biden focused on adversaries Russia and China, linking America's ability to counter them to the success of his domestic policy agenda.
America's moving forward, but we can't stop now. We're in competition with China and other countries to win the 21st century. We're at a great inflection point in history.
The circumstances of Biden's speech were unlike any previous presidential address. Members of Congress wore masks and were seated apart because of pandemic restrictions.
Well, I'm now joined by Peter Bayer, the German government's coordinator of transatlantic cooperation and a member of the German Bundestag. Mr. Bayer, there have been high hopes for a reset of German-US relations under Biden. You've said that this time it's time to build the so-called New West. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, hello. I think this window of opportunity to build a New West, to reassure the transatlantic alliance is already there. We're in the middle of it, or maybe in the first part of that. What do I mean concretely? I think it's now the chance and also the responsibility more than ever before that we over here in Europe, together with the American friends on the other side of the Atlantic, have to define politics. Where can we do jointly things together? For example, when it comes to a joint transatlantic China politic, joint transatlantic politics towards Russia. That is something that we should address rather sooner than later.
Yeah, you mentioned Russia. There's Nord Stream 2, the gas pipeline that's being constructed right now between Russia and Germany. The US is opposed to it. Germany is still pushing forward with it. Is there any compromise in sight?
Yeah, I think we should also learn, those, including myself, who have wished or hoped for a more matter-of-fact style with regards to Nord Stream 2 under the new Biden administration. we were like disillusioned. So I think we cannot respond with the same argument and the same style and manner from this side of the Atlantic now with a new administration. I want to be an enabler. I think we need to enable this new start of the transatlantic relations. What do I mean by that? It has proved that Congress especially is still very much tough on Russia, and including this Nord Stream 2 pipeline project. I think we should have at least temporary stop to finishing this pipeline. It's a second string of a pipeline that is already existing, although it's almost finished. But it is a major obstacle. Still, it is a major obstacle. It has not gone away. So I want to enable a window of opportunity to start matter-of-fact style talks, negotiations with regard to Nord Stream 2 between the Americans and the Europeans, and maybe even to really agree in a whole package with regard to a joint Russia politics, including then Nord Stream 2.
So, but a temporary stop to Nord Stream 2, what would need to change to finish it then?
I think, without knowing how these talks would look like, and I know that there are, not on the very top level, but there are talks across the Atlantic already, but not coming up with any kind of solution so far. So maybe there's a good start as we speak now. But what I could well imagine is that we could talk and maybe even agree about conditions put on a completion of the pipeline. And I was always saying also in my parliament, in my Bundestag speeches on Nord Stream 2, even if this damn thing is being finished at one point in the future, which I do not know, the flowing gas, I don't know. I think we really have to make it clear to the Russians, to the Kremlin, that we will watch under which circumstances with regard to transparency, how they get that gas out of the Russian soil, for example, how they treat the Navalny case, how Russian politics is with regard to Ukraine. Again, I am advocating for a whole transatlantic package, Nord Stream 2 being only one element of that, towards the Kremlin. I think that is super important that we don't waste any more time. And again, Nord Stream is an obstacle for that so far.
Peter Bayer, Germany's coordinator of transatlantic cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Biden, of course, came into the presidency with lofty ambitions. He pledged to bring the country out of the pandemic, to fight racial injustice, and to make a once-in-a-generation investment, creating what he called the strongest, most resilient, and innovative economy in the world. 100 days into his presidency, he's poised to rack up quite a bill, $6 trillion in proposed spending costs, total costs of his legislative proposals so far this year. Now, the first $1.9 trillion has already begun flowing into the economy, including those $1,400 stimulus checks for many Americans. Biden has also proposed a $2.3 trillion infrastructure bill, which aims to update America's ailing roads and bridges, while also improving internet and electric vehicle networks. And then that $1.8 trillion bill aimed at improving childcare and access to education. Biden plans to pay for this by raising taxes. He wants to increase the corporate tax rate to 28% and the top tax rate for America's wealthiest to 39.6%. Now, for more on this, I'm joined by Stormy Milner. She's executive director of the Aspen Institute, Germany. Stormy, welcome to the show. $6 trillion in spending proposals in 100 days. What kind of a shift would this mark for the American economy to see so much money pumped into it?
I would say it's really huge, and it could be very transformational for the U.S. economy if it goes through Congress. And I would say that's really a big if. The United States has a lot of deficits in infrastructure, in education, also in healthcare. And Biden wants to address this, and he wants to reduce poverty and income inequality. And I would say from that perspective, the proposals are spot on, but as we heard in the speech, it's really a big question also how these spending bills are going to be financed.
And of course, a question of whether they will go through Congress. this would mark a major redistribution of wealth in the U.S. As Biden mentioned, he mentioned from the bottom up instead of trickle down. Can you clarify what he meant by that?
Oh, absolutely. So trickle down is an idea or a concept which comes from actually the Reagan administration. And the idea is if you foster economic growth and if you support the richer or the higher income groups of the society, then everybody will benefit because there's going to be more spending, more demand, and then more production, more jobs. And i.e. also the poor, the lower income groups would benefit. And the last decades really have shown that that doesn't work. Income inequality has been on the rise for decades. Poverty levels have been increasing also because of the corona crisis. And his idea is to change that and support the middle class and the lower income brackets and creating demand through these approaches, through enabling more Americans to participate in economic growth through education and better healthcare.
Stormy, Biden has also promised to rebuild America's traditional alliances, including with Europe. 100 days in, where does he stand on rebuilding those alliances with Europe?
Well, he has promised America is back and diplomacy is back. And this is just, it's not just rhetoric, but it's really also actions. He reached out a hand to his allies, especially the European Union. And a lot has already been achieved. An example, for example, is the ceasefire in the Airbus-Boeing case or at least temporary, not enacting of retaliatory tariffs. But a lot more needs to be done, I think, especially in trade. The US still has the steel and aluminum tariffs in place. And that is a big, big stumbling block for the transatlantic relationship.
All right, Stormy Mildner, head of the Aspen Institute, Germany. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.